The PTB for Jason has released, and with it, we get to see his 3 new perks, and additionally, it's been revealed that there will be an original survivor that accompanies him, and they will have their own 3 perks. Jason's first perk is Hex Scared to Death. After hooking 3 different survivors, a dual totem ignites. While chasing a survivor, whenever you basic break a pallet, survivors within 13 meters scream and gain 13% hindered for 3 seconds. This isn't an amazing perk, and there's kind of 3 reasons. The first one is hooking 3 different survivors. This means that if you hook one person twice and then a second person a third time, it will not activate it. This makes the activation condition require you to spread hooks to at least 3 people, and in current DBD that can be very difficult to do, especially for weaker killers who would benefit most from hindered. Additionally, because of pallet density, the main time you would want to use this perk, which is to try and artificially decrease the area in which a survivor can reach a new loop, which is to say you make a dead zone effectively larger because the survivor has less distance they can gain. This doesn't really matter in current DBD because of pallet density. Pallets are stacked so close together that 13% hindered, practically speaking, is just never going to be enough to prevent a survivor to actually not make a loop. And because it's for such a short duration of 3 seconds, this means that by the time you catch up to the survivor who has already gotten to their pallet and their loop, the hinder will already be gone, let alone the fact that Vigil is really strong right now and basically halves this hinder to a second and a half. It just practically speaking means that this hindered is going to do almost nothing, and that's not even including the fact that it's a hex totem, meaning that if somehow by some stroke of God you've been able to get 3 hooks on 3 different survivors without already losing the game automatically, somehow you manage to break enough pallets to actually create a dead zone, if you finally are starting to get value from it, survivors can just cleanse it and bam, its effects are gone. It's just a terrible time for this perk to be here right now because so many things are working against it. The next perk is Silent Shadow. When the trial starts, you gain Undetectable for 13 seconds or until you down a survivor. When all generators are completed, you gain Undetectable. If I understand this correctly, this means that you gain Undetectable infinitely after generators complete, which is quite good. Additionally, the 13 seconds of Undetectable at the beginning of a trial are going to be quite helpful because it's essentially like not lethal pursuer in terms of your pathing being optimal, but lethal pursuer in terms of survivor pathing being suboptimal. Because survivors will not be able to pre-run you, they don't know which direction you're coming from without the heartbeat, and this means that they will path poorly into you, they'll make less distance when you find them, and overall your time at the beginning is just going to be a lot easier, especially if you're an insta-down killer like Bubba or Billy. It's going to be extremely easy for you to get those early insta-downs if you play your hands correctly. Additionally, even if you're not an insta-down killer, if you're somebody like Blight who can really quickly traverse through the map, you can still get value because while lethal would allow you to go straight to a survivor in 2 rushes and then hit them with the 3rd, this prevents them from getting to a loop in the first place, meaning you might not even need to use those next 3 rushes. You may only need to use a singular lethal rush. So use 4 to search around the entire map, and then the last one to hit them while they're off guard. Lastly, Rampage. Whenever you basic break a pallet or breakable wall, you gain 1 token up to 13. When you are blinded or pallet stunned for the next 13 seconds, you gain 1% haste for each token. This is just also not a great perk. Because you have to slowly gain the tokens until you get enough haste by breaking several breakable walls, the haste doesn't really come into factor until you're at about 7% or so haste. But the issue that you find at this point is that you have to be getting blinded or pallet stunned. Now, if a survivor is sort of not paying attention, they don't realize that you have this perk equipped and they're passively blinding you, this can get you some value. But not every lobby has flashies, and not every survivor will just blind you and give you free haste. So in practice, the most consistent way to get this perk is by getting pallet stunned. The issue is that if you get pallet stunned, that's like 3 seconds. If you want to break that pallet, that's another 3 seconds, and bam, half your haste is already gone. After this, you have to then use this haste to catch up to a survivor, and while it does help you in some aspects to catch up a little bit faster, again, pallet density is here, which means that a survivor is definitely going to be able to reach a loop before you get any value out of it. On to the survivor perks. These are significantly stronger, which kind of is how it feels. Yeah, it kind of is how survivor and killer has been feeling. First, wide open throttle. Whenever you fast vault a pallet, you gain 15% haste for 3 seconds. The pallet is reset, blocked for 60 seconds, and all survivors see its aura for that time. What this is effectively an exhaustion perk that doesn't exhaust you. Instead, it has a passive cooldown that goes down in 60 seconds. If you remember the old exhaustion, and I mean the old exhaustion, the original exhaustion, this is how exhaustion used to work. It would just go down while you're still running. You didn't have to walk or crouch. Now, it is 15% haste, sure, but the issue is that not only is it 15% haste, but it also resets a pallet, meaning the killer can't break it. And because it's for 3 seconds, this essentially means you're going to be getting the distance that you would have gotten from the killer breaking the pallet. In essence, every time you use this perk, you're getting a completely free pallet's worth of distance while also preventing the killer from breaking a pallet. And that's not even factoring in the fact that it's going to be coming back and that you can use it with an exhaustion perk. You can use this, you can drop a pallet, get 15% haste, go to main, drop off a main building, trigger balanced landing, and during that entire time, by the way, the 60-second cooldown is going down. You get to use balanced landing alongside this 15% haste perk, alongside of resetting a pallet, and so combining these things, 60 seconds, practically speaking, isn't as much of a detriment as you might think, especially because of pallet density and if you're versing a weaker killer. So many things go together. In my opinion, they should change wide open throttle to just be an exhaustion perk. Though the issue with that is that then it gets affected by vigil, and 20 seconds is just not a long time. We are just in a very bad spot for killer, to be honest. There isn't a good way to balance it because of how many balancing decisions have been made, and so it's really difficult to say. In a world without Vigil, this should be an exhaustion perk. Frankly, exhaustion should be 60 seconds by base kit, but whatever. In a world without Vigil, this should be 60 seconds, but in a world with it, 20 seconds of walking is quite practical, as we see with current sprint bursts, but I think that's still the right call, just because of the fact that you should not be able to stack a 15% haste perk triggering independently from something like balanced landing or lithe, because for this you could lithe off of a window, make a bunch of distance, drop a pallet, and then pseudo lithe with wide open throttle off of that pallet, and then reset it and keep the loop. It does too much to be able to synergize with exhaustion perk, which is an already extremely strong mechanic. Next is lend a hand. Once per trial and per survivor, after you have bloodster cleansed one totem while healing another survivor, use F to give them 4 permanent healing charges. So this is charges, not percent. I originally read it as percent, and I thought that's actually not the worst perk, but it is for charges. What this means is that you'll be able to permanently remove 4 seconds from a heal. If you don't know, 16-second heals are the base timer, so you'll be going from 16 down to 12. That is 25% of the healing. This is, in my opinion, it should be too strong of a perk, but practically speaking, it is outclassed because of perks like Resurgence or Botany or Do No Harm. The healing meta for survivors is already so strong right now that it's not really worth it to use this perk, which is really sad because this would be an incredibly strong perk. And if you release this perk like 4 or 5 years ago, back when hit and run was somewhat viable, back when Sloppy Butcher wasn't gutted, this would be a really good perk. But practically speaking, right now, Resurgence is just better because you're not going to be dealing with Sloppy Butcher because it's a terrible perk, and it just does 70% of your healing. You could either take 70% of your healing or 25% of your healing. Now, the thing is, you can stack these two and do 95% of your healing, and then you're literally like half of a second to heal. In a good world, it would be too strong, or it would be super high meta, but as it stands, the fact that you have to spend 12 seconds cleansing or blessing a totem genuinely is a pretty notable detriment because you're only saving 4 seconds and spending 12. So this probably is a perk that is balanced in the current world we live in where survivors are just so unbelievably strong. But in a better world where survivor was better balanced, this would probably be just a little bit too strong. Lastly is cross-examination. While in the killer's terror radius, the killer leaves light marks that last for 10 seconds that you can see. While in the killer's light marks, you gain elusive. This ends after 5 seconds. Essentially, you give the killer scratch marks, and then also if you walk on these scratch marks, you gain elusive. This isn't going to be great for tracking the killer in terms of when you're not in chase, but when you are in chase, this could actually be really strong. If you see that there are no fresh light marks, you know that a killer hasn't doubled back or done anything tricky. You know that they have never been in this area. So it can, in certain tiles and under certain situations, sort of delete mind games and help you to not need to use check spots as often. Additionally, the elusive lasting for 5 seconds, and if I read it correctly, essentially being infinite as long as you're walking on the light marks, makes this maybe the most consistent stealth perk. It's probably not the best just because of the fact that Lucky Break's combination with Overcome is so good. However, Lucky Break can run out and a killer can play around Lucky Break by just chasing you until the timer goes out and then you don't get value out of it. Here, there's no cooldowns, there's no resetting, there's no time it runs out, and the fact that it lasts for 5 seconds means that this has potential to be very good. I think cross-examination is maybe it should only be 3 seconds of elusive after leaving the scratch marks. Maybe it should have some kind of a cooldown. That way, if you're constantly on the killer's scratch marks, you don't just have infinite elusive, and it makes it really easy to lose the killer just because of the fact that you never leave scratch marks while in a loop, and you could just randomly duck in a locker. Honestly, cross-examination also may be a bit too strong for a stealth perk, but I don't know. So in summation, Killer has one really bad perk in Hex Scared to Death, one okay perk in Silent Shadow, and one that I'm a little bit on the fence about in Rampage. Survivor has an incredibly overpowered perk that needs to be nerfed before it goes live in Wide Open Throttle, a perk that should be nerfed in a if Survivor was balanced, but unfortunately Survivor is unbalanced, so it's probably going to stay as is in Linda Hand. And finally, a perk that probably needs a little bit more conditions on it, just a little bit of a nerf either in cooldown or in time of leaving the scratch marks. I just don't think it's great that you can permanently not leave any scratch marks with cross-examination as it stands. So yeah, a bit rough for Killer in terms of perks, and a little bit too strong for Survivor in terms of perks, but I suppose that's kind of just how it is nowadays. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.